Hello world, my name is David Oze, and in this channel we talk about how to create and integrate APIs so you can improve your existing applications. Today we're going to take a look at how to integrate our DummyJSON API inside the backend, and for the backend we'll be using Node.js. To begin, I will recommend that we have the Node version 14 installed or above. We are going to install these two packages, Express and Axios. Axios, which is the same library that we've used in our front-end implementation. We are going to create some folders, some files in order to have our server up and running. So without any delay, I'm going to jump into the terminal in order to execute some commands. And the first thing that I want to do is to check my node version just by typing node-v. And next, we need to create our package.json file. And to do that, we simply have to enter npm init-y to skip all the questions. And we have our package.json file created. The next thing we may need to do is to install our packages, npm I or install express, then Axios. This should take some time. Once installed, we can check in the package.json to make sure everything is in there. So we have Axios and Express were installed. So the next thing that I want to do is to create a .env file already where we're going to put our secret variables, and we may also need to start with our configs. And the first thing that we need to add inside our package.json is this type module. So why do we need this? Simply because I do not want to type const express then require express. This is what we need to do before. But nowadays, using front-end JavaScript applications like React or Vue, this is what we can do in on the server side as well. Import express from express. And to do this, we need to add this type module so that our server will know that we want to use the ES6 way of writing code. And I'm just going to add it just below the main and save my file. The next thing we need to do is to add this start script, and this should be inside the script object. And so we can do npm start in order to start our server. And you can see that we have this watch. Before, we used to install a nodemon in order to watch our server, so we don't have to restart the server every time we make some changes. But nowadays, this is built in a Node.js just by using this script here. And we need to create some server file in which we're going to write our server code, and we have the env also, which is taken into consideration. So no need to install a package like .env. So I'm going to close this for now, save this package.json, save this file as well, and create then the server.js. So inside my server.js, I just want to import, since this is recognized by the server. So import express from express. I just want a section here where I will be writing all my variables. Sorry. And I'm going to create my first variable, which is going to be the port. And this one can come from the env file because I want it to be a secret variable. So I can create a port variable inside my env file, or I can tell him to listen to the port 7000. So let me save this for now and return to the .env. And inside here, I can just create my variable port and then give it the value 8000, for example. So feel free to give any value of your choice. And next, we may want to create the application in order to init our express package. So just by doing this, we can have our app variable, and I'm going to start the server. So let me call this start server. So to do that, I should have this app.listen, then call the port variable, which is the first parameter in the listen function, and then add a callback function here, which is going to get executed once we start our server. And I can say with this server running on port, then port variable. So by doing this, I can then run the command npm start, and they should get our server up and running because we have the log message server running on port 8000. So let's jump into the server and see, verify if that's working. So to do that, we can just localhost this way and then 8000. So we have this cannot get slash. What does it mean? So it simply means that we have not yet created any, slash route inside our server, so the browser is unable to get this route. So how do we explain this? We can actually try to, access our 7000 port, and you shall see that that's not going to be accessible because there is no server on my system running on the port 7000. So this means that our server is up and running, and we can also verify that in our console by just checking the network tab and refreshing the page. Then we should have something like page not found, which is correct. Yeah, because this is a route, it's a get method. As we learned before, the browser makes a get request by default. And when trying to make this get request to the endpoint slash, the server or the browser is not able to get this route because we have not yet created this route. So this 404 is a correct message that we should expect from the server. So the next thing I want us to do is then to go back to our server and then try to create some folders as it's instructed to us here. And the first folder we need to create is the route. So I'm just gonna create a folder, call it routes. And next I need a folder called controllers. I also need a folder called middleware. Then inside my route folder, I need to create a file here, which I can name. You can name it anything, but I'm gonna name it app-routes.js. And inside the controllers, I'm going to create app-controllers.js. Then the last file or the two last files that I need to create are inside the middleware folder, or should be inside. We have error handler.js. Then we should have not found.js. So to save some time, I'm just going to pause the video for now and copy some code so that we have all that we need, and we shall discuss all the code pasted. Back to the video, we're going to look at some files in which I've added some code. So the first file that I want us to take a look at will be the not found file. And in here, we can see that we have a function. It's a middleware. So a middleware is just a function which is executed during the runtime of our application when we try to reach an endpoint. So there is this file which gets executed in the workflow or in the process of, in the execution time. So in the not found here, we use the request parameter, the response parameters, then next. And what we're doing here is just sending an error. So to whom are we sending this error? We're sending this error to our error handler so that every time a route is not found, this should be the error message that we get. And alongside with the message, we're also sending the status, which is the 404 status code. And the next method here is it's what we use to pass information from one function to another, from one middleware to another. So doing this next error is simply sending this next to the next middleware who is responsible of catching this information. So that being said, we can now understand what happens inside the error handler, or what's happening. What's happening here is that we have this error parameter, we have the request, the response, the next, and what we're doing here is simply checking if we have any error dot status. Just grabbing that error status, whatever the status is, and then we are sending that status alongside with some message in a JSON format with the error message which is being created. So in that case, with the not found middleware, we should have our error message in here saying route not found. And the status code should also be specified in the request or in the response of the request. So else, if there is no error status sent, by default, we're going to send this 500, which is an internal error server, and we're going to send, the message which is being sent. So that's it for these two files, and we want to check also what's happening inside the server. And inside the server here, we are first of all importing our routes. So this app-routes.js is simply holding all the routes that we will be creating for our API, for our backend. We have our middlewares being called, our variables, our parsers here, which are just allowing Express to handle JSON data or URL encoded data. We may also need, this is not compulsory, but we may also need to disable the default browser caching just by creating a middleware right inside the use method. And we have this slash API. Everybody's doing it. This is just to say this is the base URL of our API. So we can have endpoints like API slash then let me say users, for example. So the base endpoint or the base URL by default is going to be this slash API. Then we can create different endpoints like users, like products, so we don't have to repeat API all the time. And this is not compulsory. You can still keep it slash and it's still going to work. But let's just keep it API for now. And we want the app.use. In app.use, we want to specify our not found middleware. So this is actually how we add a middleware inside the process flow or the execution flow, so that when we reach or we try to reach an endpoint, we have this not found, which is being executed in the execution process. So something from the error handler, this is what we do. If we don't do that, our middleware are not going to enter into the execution flow. And once all that is created, we can now just run our server. And what we are going to do next is to create some routes inside our app-routes file. We still have nothing in here, and we also want to create the controllers which will add some functionalities inside our server. So for now, I just want to start the server so we can get things started. So let's do our npm start. We have some errors here. We have import router from router. What does it say? The request module does not provide an export. Oh, that's correct. So we still not have this router inside our app router or app routes file. This is something we need to create. So I'm just going to import Express here from Express. And the next thing I need to do is to create my router. And this should be a router or express dot router, and we want the router to be capital. So oops, This is how we want it to be. And we can just create our routes. So how do we create our routes? We can call this variable router and then just have dot get if we writing some get, you know, routes, if we creating some get routes, if we get methods, whatever. So you need to write dot post if you're creating a post request, dot put and so on. So this is how it actually works. But in this example, in our implementation, we don't need any post request. We're just going to create some get requests. And once all that created, we need to export our route or router variable. So export um, variables, okay, whatever. So we just want to say export default router so that this get exported without having to destructure it. So inside the get here, we can, add an endpoint. So I'm just going to call it test. And in the second parameter, we need to create a function, and this is the controller which we're going to later on create and just add here. So this is just to test our route. So we need the request and response parameters, and inside here I just want to send a response as a JSON. Let's say response dot JSON. We may also send some status. Let me say 200, which means okay, then JSON, then I can just send a message and say this is just a test. So that being said, we can save this and try it inside our browser. I'm just gonna refresh the page, and normally we have our not found route working very well because this route does not exist. So we have this JSON here, route not found. So we can have it also inside here. In our response, we have our message route not found. So I'm just gonna close the console for now. We may not really need it right now. I'm just gonna go to the endpoint API, then slash test. And as you can see, we have our JSON. This is just a test. So this is how we create a basic route using Node.js. And what we may need to do is to create these functions inside uh, the controller file so we can have everything organized. And that being said, that's all for me, and I'll see you in the next one.